Hello and welcome. Settle in wherever you are and let the sounds around you soften for a while. If these quiet journeys through the past help you slow down, you can like the video and subscribe to Human and Time, and then simply let the world ahead begin to open. Long before the roads, fences, towns, and electric lights that would one day cross this land, the prairie stretches almost without interruption beneath an immense late summer sky. It is around the year 1780 on the western Great Plains, near the eastern approaches of the Black Hills. Far beyond the open grass, the darker country of Suppa rises against the horizon, its pine-covered slopes appearing almost blue-black in the weak light before dawn. For now, however, the hills are only a shadow. The camp is still. A loose circle of bison hide tepis rests on the prairie, their long pine poles reaching upward into the darkness. From a few smoke openings, the faintest thread of gray drifts into the cold air. Most of the fires have fallen low. What remains is not flame so much as a red glow hidden beneath ash, waiting for a hand to stir it back to life. Inside one of the lodges, the air is warmer than outside. The smell of old smoke clings to the hide above, darkening the upper surfaces little by little with every fire that has burned there. Robes lie close around sleeping bodies. The ground beneath them is firm, and the air beyond the hide wall has cooled during the night. But within this small circle of shelter, the warmth of the embers, the robes, and the people themselves has held back the prairie cold. Nothing here is permanent in the way a stone house is permanent. The lodge can be taken down. The poles can be gathered. The hides can be folded. The household can move. Yet there is nothing temporary about the feeling of home. That distinction is easy to miss when looking backward across centuries. A house does not need foundations to hold memory. A family does not need a fixed street to recognize the place where it belongs. Here among the Lakota, home travels because the people travel. And the shape of the camp is carried not only in poles and hides, but in relationships. Around this lodge are other lodges belonging to relatives. The family sleeping here does not exist as an isolated little island of parents and children. Nearby are grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and relatives whose obligations and affection stretch through the larger Taiyospe. The camp is made of hides and poles, but the deeper structure holding it together cannot be seen from a distance. It is kinship. Outside, a horse exhales. The sound is soft, but deep enough to pass through the hide wall. Another answers with a quiet movement of hooves against dry ground. Somewhere farther away, a dog gives a single low bark and then becomes silent again. The prairie waits. As the eastern horizon begins to pale, shapes return to the world one by one. First the tops of the teepee poles, then the uneven line of the grass. Then horses beyond the lodges, their bodies still dark against the lighter sky. And finally the camp itself, no longer a group of shadows, but a place with paths, bundles, drying racks, stacked equipment, and traces of yesterday's work. The first person to rise does not make an announcement. There is no need. A robe shifts. Someone reaches toward the center of the lodge and works carefully at the embers. Dry fuel catches slowly. A small orange edge appears under the ash. The glow becomes a flame, then another. Soon the fire gives off enough light to find familiar objects without searching for them. The smell changes almost immediately. Cold ash gives way to new smoke. The hide walls take on a warm amber color as the flame brightens. Beyond the entrance, dawn continues. Other fires are waking now. A thin line of smoke rises from one lodge, then another. Dogs begin to move between the typists. A child appears briefly at an entrance, wrapped against the cool air, looks out toward the horses, and disappears again. There is no single bell that wakes the camp. The camp wakes as living places do. One sound encourages another. A fire crackles. A horse stamps. Someone speaks in a low voice. A dog shakes dust from its coat. The quiet of night does not end. It simply becomes morning. The air is cool enough that the warmth of a robe still matters. Later, the open prairie sun will press down on shoulders and dry the ground until every footstep can disturb a little dust. But late summer on the plains holds both temperatures in the same day. The body knows this before the mind thinks about it. For now, hands remain close to warmth. Outside the lodge, the camp circle becomes clearer. The typists are not scattered without thought. They belong to a social world, and the arrangement of families reflects that world. Between the lodges lies open space through which people move easily. Some areas hold racks where long strips of bison meat are drying. Elsewhere, hides from a recent hunt are being worked and prepared. The hunt itself is not happening today. Its presence is everywhere. Thin strips of meat darken in the morning air. A stretched hide lies close to the ground, held in place so that the inner surface can be scraped clean. Bundles wait to be repaired or packed. The smell of animal fat lingers near the work areas. And beyond the camp, far out on the prairie, the animals from which so much of this world is made are still moving across the grass. Bison. They are food, certainly, but calling them only food would be like calling a tree only firewood. Their hides can become lodge coverings and robes. Their meat can be eaten fresh or dried. Fat can be preserved and combined with powdered dried meat. Bone, horn, hide, rawhide, sinew, and other useful parts enter the practical life of the camp in different ways. The animal is present even when no living bison stands nearby. It is above you in the hide of the lodge, beneath you in a robe, beside you in tools and containers, hanging on racks in strips that will become lighter and drier as the sun rises. The relationship is visible in almost every direction. A woman kneels beside a stretched hide and begins working its surface. The motion is patient rather than dramatic. Scrape, shift, scrape again. A tool moves across the inner side of the hide, removing what must be removed before the material can become something durable and useful. The work is physical. Shoulders lean forward. Fingers adjust their grip. The hide pulls slightly against whatever holds it stretched. Nearby, another task has already begun. Meat is checked on the racks. Pieces prepared thin enough for drying hang where air and sun can reach them. Preserving meat is not an afterthought. A successful hunt can provide more than a group can consume immediately. And dried meat is valuable because it can remain useful long after fresh meat would spoil. Later, some of it may be pounded and combined with fat, and berries may join it in wasna. Food becomes portable. Seasons can be crossed. Journeys can be made with nourishment already prepared. But this morning the transformation is not complete. The meat is still drying. The hide is still being worked. The fire is still young. Much of life here is made of things becoming other things. A hide becomes shelter. Meat becomes stored food. A pine pole becomes part of a moving home. A horse becomes more than an animal grazing near the edge of camp. It becomes speed, carrying power, hunting skill, and distance made smaller. The horses now draw more attention as the light strengthens. Some graze beyond the immediate cluster of typists. Others stand closer to people. Their presence would have changed the lives of earlier generations profoundly. By this time, however, horses are no novelty in Lakota life. They are woven into travel and hunting so deeply that the movement of camp cannot be imagined in quite the same way without them. Before horses carried the heavier burdens of the plains, dogs had pulled smaller travois. Dogs still move through camp, but the horse has enlarged the scale of mobility. 2 long poles can be secured along its sides and extended behind it, forming a travois capable of carrying household goods, meat, children, older people, or others who cannot travel easily on foot. The same long lodge poles that help form a tipi can become part of the moving structure when camp is broken. A home, in other words, contains the means of its own travel. The thought feels almost weightless here because no one needs to explain it. A woman checks a strap. A man looks over a horse intended for more demanding use. A child watches from a few steps away. Learning happens in these ordinary moments. Not everything a child needs to know is delivered as instruction. Much of it is absorbed through repetition, seeing which strap is tightened, how a hide is scraped, how meat is cut for drying, how a horse is approached, how an older relative handles a tool, how the fire is kept alive without wasting fuel. Knowledge enters the hands before it ever needs to become a lesson. The camp is growing busier now, but never loud in the way a modern settlement might be loud. There is no machinery. No wheels rattling over stone streets, no doors slamming in wooden frames. The sounds remain close to the materials from which the camp is made. Hide flexes in the breeze. Rawhide creaks, hooves press into earth. A scraper passes over skin. Firewood breaks, people speak. A child laughs somewhere beyond the next lodge. And from the grass comes the steady life of insects and birds. The prairie itself never becomes silent simply because humans have begun their day. Wind moves through mixed grass in long, soft waves. Small birds call from the open country. Farther away, a prairie dog gives a sharp alarm. One horse lifts its head. For a few seconds, several people glance in the same direction, then return to what they were doing. Most sounds here do not demand a story. They belong to the place. As the sun reaches farther across the ground, the darker black hills become more distinct on the horizon. Patches of ponderosa pine make the higher country appear heavier than the open prairie around it. Between these worlds are places where grassland and woodland begin to mingle, where a traveler can move from open rolling country toward creeks, slopes, and stands of pine. The camp has not been placed randomly in an empty wilderness. Water matters. Wood matters. Grass for horses matters. The movements of bison matter. Travel is shaped by the needs of people and animals together. A camp that can move freely is still tied to the land in hundreds of practical ways. That may be why the word wandering feels wrong. There is movement, yes, but movement is not the same as aimlessness. The land is read, water is remembered, grazing is noticed, tracks are followed. The condition of horses matters. The location of herds matters. Places are connected through memory long before they are connected by any written map. The sun is high enough now to touch the upper surfaces of the lodges with a warmer color. Bison hide does not shine with the clean brightness of canvas. Its surface carries texture, seams, hues, weather, smoke, and the marks of labor. The lodge looks as though it belongs to the same earth on which it stands. From one angle the hide is pale. From another it becomes brown, gray. Where smoke has passed repeatedly near the top, the surface darkens. The poles rise above it unevenly and catch the light. There is beauty here, but it is not the beauty of decoration arranged for an observer. It is the beauty of things that work. The teepee sheds wind. It can hold warmth. Its opening can bring people in and out of a shared interior. It can be taken apart and carried onward. A painted lodge may exist, but not every teepee needs to announce itself with elaborate images. Most of what holds the camp together is quieter than that. A child comes out again, this time fully awake. The child moves toward relatives in another lodge without crossing any boundary that feels formal. Nearby adults continue working. A dog follows for a short distance, becomes distracted by a smell, then stops. The Tayospe is visible in this freedom of movement. One household blends into another. A person can be cared for by more than 2 adults. An older relative can teach. A cousin can become a companion. Responsibility travels sideways as well as downward through generations. The camp is therefore full of overlapping circles. The lodge, the immediate household, the wider family, the camp circle, and beyond all of them, the land. None stands entirely alone. Near another fire, food is being prepared. There is bison meat, some fresh and some already dried, fat is valuable. Roots gathered from the prairie, including timpsila, belong to the wider food world of the people. Berries can be dried or used with meat and fat. Corn may also appear through trade with agricultural peoples farther east and north, including Mandan communities with whom Lakota groups exchange products. That single presence of corn can tell a larger story without interrupting the morning. The camp is mobile, but it is not isolated. Objects and foods move along networks much wider than what can be seen from this circle of typists. So do tools, so do ideas, so do horses. And by the late 18th century, European-made trade goods have already entered indigenous exchange systems across the plains. An iron knife may lie among older technologies made of hide, bone, horn, wood, stone, and sinew. Glass beads may appear, though not in the overwhelming quantities associated with much later 19th century imagery. A firearm may be present, yet bows and arrows remain deeply important, especially in bison hunting. The world of 1780 is not frozen between two ages. It is changing. But change rarely arrives as a clean line. Old and new sit beside one another. A hand that has always known hide can also use iron. A hunter can value a firearm and still rely on a bow. A lodge can be made in an old form, while some of the objects inside it have traveled astonishing distances through trade. This is how history usually feels to the people living through it. Not like an era beginning, not like a page turning, just another morning in which familiar things remain familiar while unfamiliar things slowly become ordinary. The sun continues upward, the chill retreats. Robes are loosened or set aside. The smell of warming grass grows stronger near the ground. Dust begins to rise more easily beneath feet and hooves. The horses, dark silhouettes only a short while ago, now show their full color and movement. One of them is being handled with particular care. Not every horse has the same purpose. Some can carry loads. Some can pull a travois. Some are especially valuable for hunting, where speed, steadiness, and the ability to approach bison without panic matter enormously. A hunting horse must know the smell, motion, and noise of the herd well enough not to become useless at the very moment it is most needed. So a relationship develops through repeated handling. The human watches the horse. The horse watches the human. Neither needs the other to become something it is not. Their usefulness comes from learning how to move together. A few children linger nearby, watching. Perhaps one imitates the gesture of an older person with an imaginary rein. The movement lasts only a moment before attention shifts elsewhere. The camp offers too many things to observe. Someone is repairing equipment. Someone else is checking meat. A woman continues scraping hide. A dog has found shade beside a lodge. A horse flicks flies from its flank. Smoke rises almost straight for a few seconds. Then the wind catches it and bends it toward the west. The day is beginning to warm in earnest. Out beyond camp, the grass rolls away under the light. There are places where bison have passed. There may be hoof marks pressed into softer ground, cropped grass, wallows where the animals have rolled in dust, and the faint signs of a herd that can never truly be separated from the human life nearby. In late summer, the bison themselves are moving through the rut. Large bulls have joined the herds. Their deep bellows can travel across open ground. Sometimes the sound is heard before the animals can be clearly seen. A low vibration arrives on the wind, distant enough that conversation does not stop. Another follows. Then nothing. The prairie swallows the sound again. A person at the edge of camp looks outward for a while. There is no urgency. The recent hunt has already filled racks and work areas. Today is shaped by what came after. Preserving, repairing, preparing, teaching, eating, watching the horses, noticing the weather, maintaining all the small systems on which movement depends. This is the part of historical life that often disappears first. Events survive because they can be named. Battles have dates. Treaties have signatories. Journeys have destinations. But a hide being scraped at mid-morning has no date of its own. A child carrying a small object between two lodges leaves no monument. The smell of drying meat is not carved into stone. A horse lowering its head to grass does not enter a chronicle. And yet most human life has always been made of such things. Ordinary acts repeated so faithfully that entire societies can rest upon them. The old traveler in us notices this because there is nowhere else to look. No palace rises above the camp. No king crosses a courtyard. No bell tower measures the hours. Time is carried instead by light, by temperature, by hunger, by shadows shortening, by work moving from one stage to the next. The sun has climbed far enough now that the space between the lodges is bright. Morning is no longer young. The tippy interiors grow darker by contrast, cool pockets of shade beneath hide. Outside, the drying racks take the sun fully. The stretched hides warm. Insects become more active. The earth gives off the dry smell of late summer. Someone carries food toward relatives. Another person crosses the open center of the camp. A child calls out. A dog answers with a bark. Above everything, the sky expands. There are few things in the camp that interrupt the horizon. The teepee poles point upward, but they do not close the view. Smoke rises and thins until it becomes impossible to distinguish from air. Far away, the dark hills remain. Nearer, horses move slowly through the grass. And somewhere beyond them, unseen for the moment, bison continue across the plains. The day has only begun to open. As the light strengthens, the distance begins to reveal details that had been hidden inside the brightness. The prairie is not a single surface after all. It rises and falls gently, gathering darker grasses in shallow places and becoming shorter where animals have grazed. Here and there, the ground carries signs of movement that no human hand has made. Hooves have pressed into earth. Grass has been cropped close. Dust lies loose inside shallow wallows where heavy bodies have rolled. The people of the camp do not need to walk far to understand what has passed through this country. The land keeps traces. A person who knows how to look can read them without ever calling the process reading. Beyond the lodges, several horses have moved farther into the grass. Their heads remain low as they graze, tails flicking at insects. The warmer air brings more flies now, and occasionally a horse shivers its skin or stamps a hoof. Nearer the camp, another animal stands, while equipment is checked and adjusted. The touch of hide, hair, wood, and rawhide belongs to the work of the morning. There are no manufactured saddles arranged in neat rows, no fenced stables separating horses from human life. The animals occupy the same broad world as the camp itself. They are close enough to hear, watch, approach, and care for, and valuable enough that their condition matters to everyone whose life depends upon movement. A strong horse can make distance different. A trained hunting horse can make the movements of a bison herd something a rider can approach rather than merely follow from afar. And a horse drawing a travois can carry a weight that once demanded many smaller journeys. Two long poles extending behind an animal may appear simple when lying on the earth. Yet when the camp moves, those poles become part of a larger transformation. Household belongings can travel. Meat can travel. Children can travel. Older people can remain with their relatives even when a journey would otherwise be difficult. The camp can fold itself into motion. For the moment, though nothing is being folded, the typus remains standing. The drying racks remain full. The stretched hides remain under patient hands. There is enough work here to occupy the warmth of the day. A scraper continues over hide, its repeated sound blending into the other noises of camp. It is neither musical nor harsh. It is simply regular. A short pull, a pause, a change of position, another pull. The person doing the work knows by touch where the surface still needs attention. Nearby, another pair of hands works with meat. Preservation changes the appearance of food slowly. Fresh meat has weight and moisture. Drying draws both away. Strips become darker and firmer as air and sun pass over them. Once dried, meat can remain useful long after the immediate abundance of a successful hunt has passed. The knowledge required for this work is easy to underestimate because the tools can look simple. But simplicity of equipment is not simplicity of skill. A hide scraped poorly is not the same material as one worked well. Meat cut too thickly will not behave like meat prepared correctly for drying. A horse handled without understanding can become dangerous or useless. A lodge badly placed or poorly secured will meet the wind differently from one raised by experienced hands. Everywhere in camp, knowledge is being expressed through movements too familiar to require explanation. The children see those movements. They see them again tomorrow, and again whenever the same work returns. One child pauses near the hide being worked, watching for a while before attention wanders toward something happening farther across the camp. Another follows an older relative carrying a small bundle. There is no formal boundary between watching and learning. The world itself provides the lesson. In an open patch of ground, a hoop begins to roll. For a moment it seems almost weightless, tracing a narrow path across the earth. A stick follows it. The game demands timing and accuracy. A moving target does not wait politely for the hand to decide. Eyes measure speed. The body responds. The stick lands. And a small burst of voices rises from those watching. Then the hoop is retrieved. Again it rolls. The sound is brief, almost swallowed by the prairie. Skills practiced in play do not have to be announced as preparation for adulthood. A child can simply enjoy the movement, the challenge, the satisfaction of coming closer than before. Nearby adults continue their work. Life does not stop to watch childhood happen. Childhood happens inside life. A gust passes through the camp and lifts loose strands of hair. The tippy coverings respond with a soft movement, tightening against poles on one side and easing on the other. Smoke that had been rising nearly straight bends suddenly and drifts low before thinning. The wind brings another smell with it. Grass warmed by sun, dry earth, hoarse, smoke, and from the work areas, the heavier scent of meat and fat. These smells overlap without remaining separate for long. The camp has no invisible wall dividing cooking from sleeping, animals from people, labor from family. Each part of life enters the senses of the others. The same is true of sound. A dog barks. Someone speaks from inside a lodge. A horse snorts. The scraper resumes. Insects move through the grass. Far away, almost beneath everything else, comes another low bison call. The sound is deeper now. Perhaps the wind has changed. Perhaps the animals have moved closer. No one runs toward it. The bison do not exist for the camp only when a hunt begins. Their presence is part of the larger rhythm of this country. In late summer, bulls have joined the herds during the rut. Dust rises where animals wallow. Their voices carry across open ground. Large bodies that appear slow from a distance can move with astonishing speed when disturbed. To approach them requires knowledge, courage, and a horse that will not lose itself to fear. The bow remains important here. European-made firearms have entered trade networks across the plains. But they have not erased older weapons. A bow carried by a hunter is not a relic surviving from an earlier world. It is still practical technology, light enough to use from horseback and familiar enough that generations of skill live inside its handling. An iron knife may be present nearby. Glass beads may have traveled through hands and communities over distances the person wearing them has never crossed. A firearm may rest among someone's possessions. None of these things makes the camp less Lakota. Trade does not erase identity simply because an object came from elsewhere. People have always taken useful things into their lives. The important question is what they do with them once they arrive. The camp itself shows this quietly. Hide and iron, bone and glass, wood and metal. quillwork and imported materials, old forms and newly available tools occupying the same morning. History does not divide them into separate displays. The people here have no reason to call one object traditional and another transitional. Both are simply present. A woman bends over a piece of hide and works with careful hands. Decoration, when it appears, need not cover every surface. Porcupine quills can bring color and pattern to clothing and objects. The work requires patience of a different kind from scraping a fresh hide. One task asks for force and repetition. Another asks for precision. Hands capable of one may know the other as well. This is why the camp cannot be understood by dividing labor into the simple categories that later observers might prefer. The work done by women sustains the movement and material life of the community at every level. Typus must be made, raised, taken down, and maintained. Hides must become useful. Meat must become food that can survive beyond the day of the hunt. Clothing must be made and repaired. Household goods must remain ready for a life in which home may need to move. The ability to travel behind a bison economy depends as much on this labor as it does on the moment when an arrow enters an animal. The hunt may be the image that survives in paintings. The hours afterward are what make the hunt livable. A strip of meat shifts slightly on its rack. Flies circle and settle and lift again. A hand checks the drying surface. Nothing about the scene is hurried. Preservation requires time. And time is plentiful beneath the sun, even when human patience is not. Near one of the fires, food has begun to carry a stronger smell through the camp. Bison meat is part of the meal, but the plains provide more than animals. Timpsila grows beneath the prairie. Its edible root hidden below a plant that must first be recognized above ground. Other gathered foods and berries enter the diet when available. Some berries can be preserved. Some can join dried meat and fat. And there is corn. Corn tells a story unlike the bison. It does not come from the moving herds. It reaches Lakota hands through relationships with agricultural peoples, including Mandan communities, whose villages lie in another kind of world, one of fields and more permanent settlements. A few kernels can therefore contain a map. Not a map drawn on hide or paper, but a map of exchange. Bison products move one way, corn moves another. Manufactured goods enter from still farther away. Horses themselves once moved through networks from the south and west until their presence reshaped life across enormous stretches of the continent. Nothing on the plains is as isolated as the horizon makes it appear. The land looks endless. Human relationships cross it anyway. Someone near the fire handles food without giving any thought to the centuries of history that a later observer might attach to it. That is one of the gentler truths of the past. People rarely experience their own lives as historical evidence. They are hungry. They prepare food. They repair what has broken. They worry about weather. They notice whether a horse is well. They listen when a relative speaks. They look toward the horizon because something moved there. Only later do ordinary objects become clues. The sun has now changed the camp again. Shade has contracted beneath the typus and drying racks. People who were comfortable in open light earlier begin to feel the warmth on their backs and shoulders. The morning coolness has almost vanished. Inside a lodge, however, the light remains subdued. Stepping through the entrance creates an immediate change in temperature and brightness. Outside, the prairie reflects the sun from grass and pale earth. Inside, the hide walls soften it. Smoke has left its memory near the upper surfaces. Personal belongings occupy the edges of the living space. Robes that held warmth before dawn are now resting where they are no longer needed. The fire can be kept smaller. Its purpose changes with the day. A lodge like this is not a bedroom separated from a kitchen separated from a sitting room. Those divisions belong to another architecture and another way of organizing space. Here, one shelter holds many parts of life. People sleep, eat, work, talk, store belongings. Keep warm, listen to wind pressing against the covering. The same wall that protected a sleeping child before dawn now filters the brightness of approaching midday. Outside again, the heat feels stronger. A horse flicks its tail repeatedly. Another lowers itself briefly toward dust, and then rises, shaking loose earth from its coat. The movement sends a small cloud into the light. Dust belongs to late summer. It settles on feet, hides, equipment, animal hair. It gathers where people walk repeatedly. It rises from dry ground beneath hooves. The camp is clean in the way a working place can be clean. But it is not sterile. Earth enters everything because earth is everywhere. A few people move toward the horses. There is still no sign that the entire camp intends to break and travel. The movement is smaller than that. Equipment is checked. Animals are observed. Perhaps a horse needs to be brought nearer. Perhaps another has been allowed to graze. The relationship between humans and horses is practical. But practicality does not make it shallow. An animal valuable for hunting cannot simply be treated as interchangeable power. It has temperament, it has fear, it has endurance, it learns. A horse that must carry a hunter toward a bison herd needs to tolerate smells and movements that could send another animal away at once. Bison are enormous at close distance. They smell strongly. They move unpredictably. Their hooves strike the earth with a weight that can be felt as much as heard. For a horse to remain useful near them requires experience. So training begins away from the final moment of the hunt. Familiarity is built. The animal learns what does not require panic. The rider learns what the animal can bear. Across generations, the arrival of the horse has changed what a camp can carry and how hunters can approach the herds. But the transformation has not removed older knowledge. It has joined it. The bow still needs to be made and maintained. Arrows still need attention. A hunter still needs to understand bison behavior. People still need to know where water can be found. A horse does not replace the landscape. It only changes the speed at which a person can move through it. At the edge of the camp, the open country begins immediately. There is no paved threshold between human space and animal space. A few steps beyond the outer lodges, grass reaches outward toward distant folds of land. Prairie dogs live within this larger country, their towns creating patches where vegetation is cropped differently. Their alarm calls can carry sharply through otherwise soft sound. Pronghorn may appear farther away, slender and alert. Deer move through other parts of the region, while toward the darker hills, the mixture of grass and ponderosa pine creates different shelter and food. The camp stands between many worlds without needing to name the boundary. Open prairie, creek country, pine-covered heights, bison range, horse grazing, human paths. The edges overlap. A bird lands briefly on the ground and disappears into grass. Clouds have begun to form high above the horizon. They are small at first, bright against the blue. No one treats them as an omen. Weather on the plains is watched because weather matters, not because every cloud carries a message. Summer can produce thunderstorms. Wind can change quickly. Rain can arrive across open country with little to stop it. Hail and lightning belong to this landscape as surely as heat and dust do. For now, the clouds remain distant. Their shadows do not yet reach the camp. The sunlight stays strong. Near the drying racks, work continues. The hide that was being scraped earlier has changed under repeated effort. A surface that began rough with remnants of tissue is gradually becoming something that can enter another stage of preparation. The transformation is slow enough that someone passing once might think nothing has happened. Someone who has worked beside it all morning can see otherwise. This is how much of the camp's labor moves. Not through sudden completion, through accumulation. A little cleaner, a little drier, a little tighter, a little sharper, a little more prepared for whatever comes next. Time is stored inside finished things. A soft robe contains hours no one sees. A dried strip of meat contains sunlight. A repaired harness contains the patience of hands. A well-trained horse contains repeated mornings of trust and correction. A tipi contains the labor of obtaining hides, preparing them, joining them, cutting poles, transporting everything, raising the structure, living beneath it, lowering it, and raising it again somewhere else. Objects here are heavy with invisible time. Perhaps that is why so little needs to be wasted. Materials have already asked for too much work. A piece of hide is not merely a piece of hide. It has passed through an animal, a hunt, a journey back to camp, processing, drying, cutting, and human intention. Bone can become useful. Horn can become useful. Rawhide can become useful. Sinew can become useful. Fat can become useful. The principle is not perfection. Not every fragment of every animal must enter a tool or meal for the relationship to matter. But many parts carry possibilities. Knowledge recognizes them. The camp therefore contains transformations everywhere. A person walking slowly through it could begin with food and arrive at clothing without noticing where one subject ended. A strip of meat leads to the hunt. The hunt leads to horses. Horses lead to movement. Movement leads to the teepee. The teepee leads to hides. Hides lead back to bison. And bison lead outward again to grass, water, weather, and the enormous country sustaining both animal and human life. There is no neat beginning to the circle. There is no obvious end. Near one lodge, a relative brings something to another household. The exchange is small enough that an outsider might not notice. No bargaining, no ceremony. Simply one person carrying something useful to someone connected by kinship. The Tayospe is made visible again. Property exists. Individual skill exists. Personal belongings exist. But life within extended family makes constant movement between people possible. A child eats because more than one pair of hands may have contributed to the food. An older person travels because the camp can carry those who cannot move as easily. Knowledge survives because someone remembers and someone younger watches. Belonging is practical. It has weight. It carries things. It feeds people. It teaches. The hoop appears again in the open ground. This time the throw misses badly. Laughter follows. The child who threw the stick runs after it while another reaches the hoop first. For a few seconds, the entire history of the plains becomes irrelevant. There is only play. The old traveler would be wise not to turn even this into a lesson too quickly. Sometimes a child is simply a child. The sun passes a little farther westward, though midday has not yet fully settled over the camp. The shadows beneath horses shorten. The dark line of the hills seems flatter in the haze. Heat begins to shimmer faintly above patches of ground. A few people choose shade where they can. Work slows without stopping. The wind that felt cool earlier now brings relief. When it passes over skin, sweat and warmth disappear for a moment. When it fades, the sun returns. A horse breathes heavily through its nostrils and lowers its head. Somewhere behind the lodges, wood is shifted near a fire. The smell of smoke grows stronger, then weakens. Far beyond the camp, another sound rolls across the prairie. At first it might be mistaken for distant weather. Then it comes again, a bison bull, low, resonant, almost too deep to locate. A few grazing horses raise their heads. This time the sound is joined by another farther away. The herd is out there, beyond the folds of grass, perhaps visible from higher ground, perhaps hidden for now. No hunt begins. No one rushes for weapons. The sound simply becomes part of the afternoon that is approaching. The people have already taken what they needed from another hunt, and its work still surrounds them. A rack of drying meat, a hide under a scraper, fat waiting to be used, equipment being repaired, a horse being kept ready for the day when the herds must be approached again. There will be other hunts, other camps, other mornings when these typists stand somewhere else. The basin will move. the people will move. Grass will recover where hooves have passed. Wind will erase tracks from loose earth. But nothing needs to move yet. For now, the lodges remain where they were at dawn. Smoke still rises above them. The children are still within calling distance of their relatives. The horses still graze along the camp's outer edge. And as the first broader cloud shadows begin to drift slowly across the prairie, the people continue with the quiet work already in their hands. The first moving shadows are broad enough to cool the ground for only a few moments at a time. A cloud passes between the camp and the sun, and the color of everything changes. The pale hides of the lodges become duller. The grass loses some of its brightness. Horses standing in open country seem suddenly darker, and the distant hills appear closer, as though the absence of glare has pulled them toward the camp. Then the cloud moves on. Warmth returns. The prairie brightens again. Nothing in the camp stops for these changes. People simply feel them. A hand that was hot becomes cool. A child squints when the sun returns. A horse shifts its weight and turns, so that the breeze reaches another side of its body. The sky is becoming part of the afternoon. Clouds continue to gather toward the horizon, not yet threatening, but large enough to cast shadows that drift slowly over the rolling grass. From far away, they look almost like dark herds moving without bodies. The real herds are farther out. Their presence has been audible through the day, and now, from a slight rise beyond the camp, a few animals can finally be seen. At first they are only points, brown against green and gold. Then movement reveals them. One animal lowers its head. Another turns. Several smaller forms remain close to larger bodies. Bulls stand heavier and darker among cows and calves, their size unmistakable even at a distance when the light catches them correctly. No one in camp treats the sight as spectacle. The bison are not strangers arriving from another world. They belong to the same country. The people know that a herd can change direction quickly. They know that a distance which appears safe can disappear beneath running hooves. They know the smell of bison, the dust of a moving herd, the power of a bull, the nervousness of a horse that has not learned to remain steady nearby. And they know that the animals seen now are connected to the meat drying behind them. The distance between a living herd and a strip of preserved meat is not an abstract chain of production. It is remembered movement, a scout noticing sign, a camp preparing, hunters checking bows and arrows, horses selected for the work, people waiting until the time is right. Then the sudden violence of the hunt itself, followed almost immediately by labor. The plains do not separate abundance from effort. A successful hunt does not end when an animal falls. In many ways, that is when the work expands. Carcasses must be approached and processed. Meat must be moved. Hides must be removed and transported. Fat must be saved. Useful materials must be recognized before weather and time begin to take them. Women and families arrive with horses and travois, and the landscape that only moments earlier held running animals becomes a place of cutting, lifting, sorting, carrying, remembering what can be used and what must be prepared first. Today, the camp carries the quieter aftermath of such a day. Nothing is running. No arrows are being released. No herd is breaking across the grass. Yet the work of the hunt remains everywhere. A woman turns a piece of drying meat and checks its surface. Another person lifts a hide edge and adjusts it. Someone farther away sharpens or inspects a tool. The hunt has become patience. This is a transformation the old traveler notices often in human life. The moments later remembered as dramatic are usually held up by long hours that no one paints. A horse charging beside bison may become an image. A hand cutting strips of meat for drying rarely does. Yet without the second, the first cannot feed anyone for long. The clouds shift again. A brief coolness moves through camp. The smell of smoke returns more clearly because the air has changed direction. It passes across the open ground, carrying with it the scent of cooked meat and warm hide. Near one lodge, a few small pieces of corn are handled with care. Their presence would mean something different here than it would in an agricultural village. The Lakota camp does not depend upon fields surrounding permanent houses. Corn can arrive through exchange with farming peoples such as the Mandan, whose more settled communities belong to another part of the plains world. A handful of corn therefore joins two landscapes: the mobile camp, the planted field. Bison products can move toward agricultural villages. Corn can move back, and between them travel stories, objects, information, expectations, alliances, memories of previous visits, and knowledge of routes across a continent that has no need of modern borders to be connected. The same is true of metal. An iron knife lying beside hide or bone does not announce Europe every time someone uses it. Its origin may be far away, but its meaning has already changed by the time it enters this camp. It is now part of a Lakota hand, part of Lakota labor, part of Lakota exchange. The object has traveled farther than the person using it may ever travel, but distance has been folded into usefulness. Glass beads can do the same. A small imported object can cross many communities before arriving here. The world of 1780 on the Western Plains is therefore not closed. It breathes outward. Trade routes extend beyond what the eye can see. Horses themselves are reminders of that movement. They arrived through indigenous exchange and adoption long before this particular afternoon, and by now their presence has altered the rhythm of travel. Hunting, wealth, carrying, and distance. Still, no one wakes each morning astonished that horses exist. Change becomes ordinary faster than history books suggest. A generation can inherit what another generation remembers as transformation. For a child standing beside a grazing horse now, the animal is simply part of the world. The child may never know the plains without it. That, too, is how time works. One generation experiences arrival, the next experiences normality, and what seemed revolutionary becomes part of childhood. A horse near camp lifts its head toward the distant herd. Its ears turn forward. For a moment the animal becomes very still. Then it returns to grazing. A hunting horse must do more than carry a rider quickly. It must learn not to lose itself in the smell and movement of bison. The difference between an ordinary horse and one trusted near a herd is built through experience. The rider, too, must know where to place the animal. The bison has its own momentum, its own fear, its own instincts. A person cannot simply command the whole scene. The hunt works because human judgment, horse training, weapon skill, and knowledge of the herd come together within a few dangerous moments. That is why bows remain so important here, even though firearms have entered the plains. A bow does not belong to a vanished age. It is still practical. From horseback, an experienced hunter can use it quickly and repeatedly. Arrows can be carried without the delays and limitations that make early firearms less than perfect replacements for older weapons. So a bow may rest beside an iron knife. A firearm may exist in the same camp. There is no contradiction. The people living through change do not need every tool to belong to the same century in someone else's imagination. The afternoon light grows softer for a while as another cloud crosses. A small group of children has moved closer to the outer edge of camp, still within the world of relatives and watchful adults. One child kneels near the earth, interested in something too small to matter to anyone farther away. Perhaps an insect. Perhaps a mark in the soil. Perhaps nothing that would survive a description. Another child calls, and the first stands. Their movements are absorbed into the landscape. For them, the dried meat, the horses, the typists, the sound of bison, the dark hills, the smell of smoke, and the open sky are not historical atmosphere. They are simply home. The thought makes the centuries between us and them feel strangely thin. A child does not know it is living in 1780. A woman scraping hide does not know that someone centuries later may try to reconstruct the exact shape of her afternoon. A man checking a hunting bow does not imagine museums. Their world is complete without our observation. We are the ones who arrive late. The safest way to understand them may be to remain quiet enough not to make ourselves the center of the scene. The wind rises. Grass bends in a long direction across the prairie, and the hide coverings of the typists respond with a deeper rustle. A few people glance toward the clouds, not alarmed, only attentive. Weather is information. Out here, there are few walls between the body and the sky. A shift in wind reaches skin immediately. A change in pressure may arrive with smell and temperature. The growing clouds are part of daily awareness because shelter, horses, drying meat, travel, and fire all meet weather directly. A summer storm can bring rain, lightning, hail, violent wind. But not every cloud becomes a storm over the place where it first appears. Some gather their darkness and move elsewhere. This one remains far enough away that the work continues. The clouds themselves create relief from the strongest heat. Under their moving shade, the open spaces between the lodges feel briefly cooler. Someone who had been sitting in shadow stands and crosses into the open. A dog leaves the side of a lodge and stretches before walking toward another patch of shade. The camp changes without changing location. Light rearranges it. Wind rearranges it. Human movement rearranges it. Only the tippy poles hold their lines against the sky. Near the hide, working area, the rhythm of scraping has slowed. Hours of physical work gather in the shoulders and hands. The hide has become cleaner, its future usefulness gradually emerging through repetition. What it will become is not yet necessary to decide in our imagination. It may contribute to clothing, a robe, a lodge, raw hide, or some other useful object depending on how it is prepared and what is needed. The important thing is that nothing about the material is effortless. A finished hide carries labor inside it. That labor is one reason bison cannot be reduced to numbers. The animal enters human life through knowledge. Someone must know how to hunt it. Someone must know how to butcher it. Someone must know which material is useful for which purpose. Someone must know how long meat should dry. Someone must know how a hide should feel beneath a tool. The usefulness of the animal is not contained in the animal alone. It exists in the accumulated knowledge of the people. Without that knowledge, abundance can be wasted. With it, one successful hunt can become meals, storage, clothing, shelter, tools, and materials that travel into other relationships through exchange. The sun returns from behind cloud. A drying strip of meat gleams slightly at one edge before settling back into a darker color. Nearby, fat is handled separately. Combined with dried, pounded meat, and sometimes berries, it can become wasna, dense food that keeps and travels more easily than fresh meat. The transformation has its own quiet logic. Moisture is removed. Meat is broken down. Fat returns richness. Berries may bring another taste and another source gathered from the land. Food becomes smaller than the hunt from which it came. More portable, more durable. The great animal crossing the horizon becomes something that can fit inside a container and feed a traveler far from the place where the herd once stood. Human beings have always carried landscapes inside food. A root lifted from prairie soil, a berry dried beneath the sun, corn brought through trade, bison meat preserved after a hunt. Each tastes of more than itself, even if no one pauses to say so. As the afternoon moves on, the camp begins to feel less intensely active. Some tasks have reached pauses, others continue in shade. Children slow after play. Animals rest. The open heat has encouraged a rhythm different from morning. There is no clock to announce this change. The body knows. The lengthening shadow of a lodge knows. The direction of sunlight on the hide knows. People who have watched the sky and land since childhood do not need numbered hours to understand where the day has gone. The dark hills stand more clearly now because the western light has begun to shift. Ponderosa pine gives the heights their deeper tone, and the contrast against the prairie is enough to explain why the Black Hills can seem almost black when seen from far away. Pawasaspa is not merely a distant backdrop. For Lakota people, the Black Hills belong to a sacred geography and a much deeper relationship than any single camp or migration story can contain. We should not pretend to enter every sacred meaning simply because we can see the hills. Some things are better approached with restraint. The landscape can remain powerful without being translated into explanation. The people here do not need an outsider to tell them what the hills mean. It is enough for us to notice that they remain in view. Dark, forested, steady beneath the changing sky, the prairie before them is full of movement by contrast. Cloud shadows travel, bison shift, horses graze, children pass between lodges, smoke bends, grass leans and rises again. The hills seem to hold still while everything nearer moves. But even stillness is only appearance. Trees grow. Fire changes forests, rain cuts soil, animals travel through slopes, people remember roots. Time enters rock and pine, just as surely as it enters hide and bone. A distant roll of thunder reaches the camp. It is soft enough that several seconds pass before another comes. The sound does not produce panic. The storm remains far away, perhaps moving along a different path. One horse turns its body, another continues eating. A few hands move to secure or check things that wind might disturb. The drying meat is watched more closely. The sky has become something to negotiate with. A sudden rain would change the work. But for now the air beneath the cloud feels cooler, and the wind brings relief. The smell of the country changes slightly. Dry grass remains strongest, but somewhere beyond the camp rain may already be touching soil. The scent arrives faintly, carried over distance. It is possible to imagine water falling beneath a dark cloud where no human figure in this camp can see the drops. The plains are wide enough for several kinds of weather to exist at once. Sun here, rain there, lightning farther west, a blue opening beyond all of it. That breath is difficult to feel inside a room. Here it surrounds the body. The old traveler watches a piece of cloud shadow move over the bison herd. For a moment the animals almost disappear into the darker grass. Then sunlight reaches them again. A bull turns broadside. Dust rises where one animal has wallowed. Another deep call rolls outward. The rut gives these late, summer herds a different energy. Bulls that might have remained more separate at other times are among cows and calves now. Their bellows and displays belong to the season. The people know this without needing a calendar page. Animal behavior is part of the year. So are plant foods. So is weather. So are the conditions of grass and water. A season can be recognized through what the world is doing. Perhaps that is another reason time here feels less divided. Late summer is not an abstract name. It is heat at midday, coolness before dawn, bison bulls calling, dry grass beneath feet, berries and roots, storm clouds that build in warm air, meat drying in sunlight, a robe no longer needed at noon, but welcome again after darkness. The year enters the body through sensation. Near one lodge, an older person sits in shade while younger relatives continue working nearby. No one needs to explain the value of age in a society where knowledge survives through memory and repetition. To remember where water lies, how animals behave, how materials are worked, how relatives are connected, what happened in earlier years, which routes have been taken, and what stories belong to the people is to carry part of the community inside oneself. The plains may look empty to someone who does not know them. Memory fills them. A rise has been crossed before. A creek has been used before. A hunt happened somewhere beyond sight. A winter was survived. A relative is remembered. The land holds events because people carry them forward. Among plains peoples, winter counts can preserve years through pictorial records connected to oral memory. Each year marked by an event remembered strongly enough to stand for the time. The drawing alone is not the whole history. The telling matters. Memory lives between image and voice. We do not need to imagine one being made today. Its deeper importance is enough to understand why an elder's memory cannot be separated easily from history. The afternoon is beginning to tilt. Sunlight arrives more from the west. The eastern sides of objects deepen into shade. Tipi poles cast longer lines across the ground than they did a short while ago. The heat loosens its grip. A horse that had stood nearly motionless begins walking again. Children regain some energy as the air becomes easier to move through. Near a fire, preparation for later food begins without any announcement that evening is coming. The day does not change scenes, it changes color. A person brings fuel closer. Another checks what has dried enough. Someone passes between lodges carrying an object that disappears inside the next tipi. Conversation rises briefly and falls. A dog lies with its head on its paws, eyes following movement without lifting its body. The distant thunder has shifted farther away. Whatever storm was forming appears to be passing beyond the camp. Cloud edges catch brighter light now. Their undersides remain gray, but the western faces begin to glow. The wind has become softer. Smoke rises more vertically. For the first time since midday, the camp feels as though it is releasing heat rather than gathering it. The prairie does the same. Warm earth still radiates upward, but the air above it has begun to cool. The change is subtle. A bare forearm notices before the eye does. A horse's coat catches low light. The drying racks cast thin shadows. The hills darken while the sky behind them becomes warmer. Soon the same robe set aside after sunrise will begin to matter again. Soon the fires will matter differently. Soon the camp will gather more closely around food and relatives as the open distance loses detail. But the sun has not yet reached the horizon. There is still work in the light. A final strip of meat is adjusted. A tool is put down, then picked up once more. A child carries something toward an older relative. A horse shakes its mane. Beyond them, bison continue grazing as though the day belongs entirely to them. Perhaps, in a way, it does. The camp does not stand outside the prairie. It occupies one small part of the same living field. Human smoke rises into the same air through which storm clouds pass. Horse hooves press the same soil as bison. Children listen to the same insects. The dark hills hold all of them in view. And with the afternoon slowly leaning toward evening, the people continue moving through the remaining light, not yet gathering around the fires, not yet turning toward sleep, but already feeling the first cool edge of the hours that are coming. The cooler air reaches the camp slowly, first as a change against the skin, and then as a change in the way people move. Tasks that were carried out beneath the weight of afternoon heat begin to feel easier. Someone who had been working in shade steps into the open. A child runs farther without immediately stopping. Horses lift their heads more often now, and the insects around them seem less insistent than they were beneath the strongest sun. The light has become warmer. Every surface receives it differently. The grass turns gold where the sun strikes it directly and deepens toward brown where shadows stretch across the ground. The pale surfaces of the typus seem to hold the last warmth of the day. Their seams become more visible in the low angle of light, and the long lodge poles cast narrow shadows that reach farther with each passing moment. Smoke from the fires is no longer something drifting almost invisibly through brightness. Against the darkening eastern sky, it can be seen clearly. Thin gray columns rise, bend, loosen, and disappear. More fires are being tended now. The reasons are practical. Food must be warmed or prepared. The cooling air will soon make warmth desirable again. People who have spent much of the day moving between work areas and horses begin to gather more often near the lodges, but the changing fires also alter the emotional shape of the camp. During the day, the prairie has dominated everything. The eye has been pulled outward toward the herd, the hills, the clouds, the endless grass. As evening approaches, attention begins to return inward, toward smoke, toward relatives, toward food, toward the small circles of warmth that human beings make when the larger world becomes cool. Near one lodge, dried meat is taken down from part of a rack. The movement is careful. Food that has spent hours in the sun and air is inspected before being carried away. The remaining strips continue to hang, their surfaces no longer carrying the same moisture they held earlier in the day. A successful hunt can remain present for many days in this way, first as fresh abundance, then as labor, then as preserved food, then, perhaps much later, as a meal eaten far from the place where the animal was taken. Time stretches through preparation. A piece of dried meat can survive the afternoon that made it. It can travel. It can wait. It can become part of another journey. Some may later be pounded and combined with fat, perhaps with berries, into wasna. What was once a large animal on the prairie becomes concentrated into something compact enough to carry. The contrast is almost strange. A bison bull can weigh heavily upon the landscape, dark and immense beneath the open sky. The nourishment drawn from that animal can later fit inside a small container. Human knowledge has reduced distance between abundance and need, not by making either disappear, but by teaching one season how to feed another. Near the fire, another kind of food carries a different history: corn. It has not grown around this camp. No fields surround the typus. Its presence is the visible result of relationships stretching beyond the horizon. Farther toward the Missouri, agricultural villages maintain another rhythm of life, one shaped in part by planting and harvest. Through exchange, corn can move into the mobile world of Lakota families, while bison products move outward. Two economies meet without one becoming the other. The mobile hunter does not need to become a farmer to eat corn. The farmer does not need to follow the herds to make use of bison products. Trade allows landscapes to enter one another. A person eating here may taste food grown in soil they have never worked. A person elsewhere may sleep beneath or wear material carried from a hunt they never witnessed. This web of movement is invisible from the camp circle. Nothing in the evening sky marks a trade route. No road cuts across the prairie. Still, relationships connect distant communities as surely as any road could. Objects prove it. An iron knife catches the lowering sun for an instant. Its surface flashes, then becomes dull again. The moment is small, but the object carries an enormous geographical story. The metal itself was not produced by the hands now using it. It entered indigenous exchange networks through contact and trade, moved through other people, perhaps through several communities, and eventually arrived here. Once it did, however, it became part of local life. The knife does not remain foreign forever merely because it was made elsewhere. Hands give objects new contexts. A tool can travel between worlds and become ordinary. Glass beads can do the same. So can cloth. So can firearms. But none of these things has yet replaced the much older materials surrounding them. Hide remains everywhere. Wood, bone, horn, sinew, rawhide, quillwork. The camp is not divided cleanly between a traditional past and a foreign future. Both are already present. The mistake would be to imagine that people living through change feel themselves standing at some dramatic border. Mostly, they do not. They simply use what works. A new material appears beside an old one. A new possibility becomes part of an old skill. The next generation grows up assuming both belong. A little farther away, a bow rests where it can be reached easily. Its continued presence tells its own quiet story. Firearms exist in this world, yet the bow remains important for hunting. On horseback, speed matters. Familiarity matters. The ability to release another arrow without the delays of early firearms matters. A weapon does not disappear merely because another has arrived. Technologies overlap. Human habits are rarely replaced in a single moment. The people here live inside that overlap without needing to name it. The sun lowers another degree. Across the prairie, the bison are harder to distinguish now. The animals have not vanished, but distance and light are beginning to merge them into the grass. Occasionally, one dark form becomes visible when it turns broadside. A bull lowers its head, another moves through dust. The deep call heard earlier returns once more, carried more clearly through cooling air. It seems larger in the evening. During the bright afternoon, the prairie scattered sound beneath wind, insects, work, and heat. Now individual noises begin to stand apart. A horse's breath, a dog's bark, the crack of burning wood, the movement of hide, a human voice, the low bellow from somewhere beyond sight. As light fades, hearing begins to inherit what vision loses. The old traveler has known this in many places. Night does not simply remove the world, it rearranges the senses. At midday, distance belongs to the eye. After dark, distance belongs to the ear. And so the prairie that seemed enormous beneath sunlight will soon become enormous in another way, measured through sounds whose sources cannot always be seen. Before that darkness arrives, there is still enough light for one more stretch of ordinary work. A woman folds or gathers material that no longer needs to remain exposed. A child carries a small item toward a tipi. Someone checks a horse. A strap is handled. A tool is moved closer to shelter. Drying racks are inspected again. These actions do not form an official evening ritual. They simply follow from experience. Things left carelessly outside can be affected by weather. Animals must be known to be where they should be. Food must be protected. Firewood must be close enough to reach once darkness comes. An organized camp does not become organized at sunset. The order of evening has been prepared by habits repeated through years. The same can be said of travel. The camp looks settled now. Tipis stand firmly. Work areas surround them. People move along familiar paths through the grass. Yet everything remains capable of motion. A different need could pull the camp elsewhere. The herd could move. Water conditions could matter. Grazing for horses could matter. Season could matter. Relationships with other groups could matter. When the time came, the lodge coverings could be lowered. Poles could be bundled. Belongings could be secured. Travois could be prepared. Horses could draw what people once needed dogs to carry in smaller loads. And the place that now feels entirely like home could become open prairie again. Perhaps that is why the camp leaves such a gentle footprint compared with later settlements. Home is real without claiming permanence from the earth. The grass beneath a lodge has been pressed down. Paths have formed. Ash remains near fires. Work has left traces. But the land is not required to stop being prairie in order to support human life. The people move through it rather than replacing it. This should not be mistaken for a simple romantic idea of untouched nature. People affect landscapes. They hunt. They burn fuel. They move animals. They gather plants. They leave tracks. They trade. They choose campsites because certain places meet particular needs. Human beings are part of the ecology, not absent from it. The distinction matters. The prairie is not beautiful because no one uses it. It is a lived landscape, a remembered landscape, a traveled landscape, a landscape in which human knowledge has been accumulated through generations. The Black Hills darken more rapidly now. The pine-covered slopes lose detail until they become a single deep shape beneath the western light. The name Pa belongs to a world of meaning deeper than anything we should attempt to open carelessly. It is enough to know that these hills are not merely scenery. They belong within Lakota sacred geography and memory. Their darkness at the horizon carries relationships that cannot be reduced to a few explanatory sentences. The old traveler does not need to enter every sacred place with words. Sometimes respect is expressed through remaining at the edge. The hills can simply be there, watching over nothing, claiming nothing, holding their place beneath the sky. The sun nears them. The western clouds that passed harmlessly beyond the camp now catch a copper light around their edges. Their earlier gray undersides soften toward violet. No rain has reached the lodges. The meat has remained dry. The fires have not been scattered by wind. The storm has passed elsewhere, leaving behind only cooler air and a distant memory of thunder. This, too, is part of plains weather. A storm can be seen, heard, smelled, and never arrive. The width of the country allows weather to belong to another horizon. People who live beneath such skies learn to judge possibility without assuming certainty. A cloud is watched, a wind is felt, a decision can wait. In the open space near the lodges, children are quieter now. The hoop and stick game has ended. The energy of the afternoon has worn down naturally. A younger child sits near relatives while others move through the final work of the day. An older person is close enough to speak without raising their voice. The Tayospe, visible throughout the day in practical acts, becomes even more apparent as people gather. Relatives are not visitors who happen to live nearby. They are the architecture of social life. A lodge protects bodies from weather. Kinship protects continuity. Food can pass between households. Children can move among trusted adults. Knowledge can travel from elders to younger people. The camp can care for those who cannot move as easily as others. No one household contains everything required for life. The larger family makes individual weakness less absolute. Perhaps this is why belonging here cannot be understood only emotionally. It is materially useful. To belong is to be carried when necessary, fed when food exists, taught, corrected, remembered, expected. Responsibility gives affection weight. One of the dogs moves closer to a fire. Its coat catches orange light along one side. Dogs have lived beside human families through changes much older than the arrival of the horse. Before horses became established on the plains, dogs pulled smaller travois and helped carry what mobile life required. Now horses can move much greater loads, but the dog remains. Technology has changed. Companionship has not disappeared. The animal circles once before lying down. A child reaches toward it. For a while neither moves. The quiet scene contains no historical event. It will leave no treaty, record, or artifact easily identified centuries later. But it is probably closer to the texture of real life than most events that survive in written histories. A hand resting briefly on an animal, food passing between relatives, someone warming fingers near a fire, a child becoming tired. These are the things people spend most of their lives doing, while historians wait for something to happen. Something is always happening. It is simply small. The evening meal draws people more closely around the fires. The smell of meat strengthens as it warms. Smoke settles lower in the cooling air before rising. Timpsila and other gathered plant foods belong to this wider food world, along with berries when available and corn obtained through trade. The meal is not a feast invented for the sake of the story. It is food, enough to sustain the people who have worked through the day. There is no need for elaborate description of taste that no source can preserve for us. What can be known is simpler. Meat carries fat and nourishment. Dried foods are valuable because they keep. Roots connect people to plants hidden beneath prairie soil. Corn connects the camp to trading relationships. Food can therefore tell history without needing to become a lecture. The hand lifts it. The mouth eats it. History disappears into the body. The fires brighten as daylight weakens. This reversal happens quickly. A flame that was almost invisible beneath the afternoon sun becomes the brightest thing nearby. Orange light moves across faces and hands. Beyond the fire's reach, the earth turns gray. The hide walls of the typus receive a soft glow from one side, while the other disappears into shadow. Smoke acquires a blue color in the remaining daylight. Then that color fades too. A pipe may belong to certain social, diplomatic, or spiritual contexts in this world, but it should not be imagined as a decorative object passed constantly from hand to hand merely, because later images have made it symbolic. Its meanings are more serious and varied than the old phrase, "peace pipe," suggests. Pipes can belong to ceremony, diplomacy, agreements, preparation, and sacred relationships. To reduce such an object to a stereotype would be to remove precisely the depth that made it important. So if one is present this evening, the old traveler does not demand that it be used for us. Sacred things do not exist to decorate a documentary. The fire is enough. Conversation is enough. The presence of relatives is enough. Spiritual life does not always need to announce itself dramatically. A worldview can live inside ordinary behavior, inside the way land is understood, inside relationships with bison, inside responsibilities among relatives, inside stories, inside the meaning given to places. The mistake would be to imagine that spirituality begins only when someone performs a ceremony. For people whose world is not divided neatly into sacred nature and ordinary nature, the categories themselves may be ours rather than theirs. So the narration stays quiet. The night is coming. That is enough to notice. Above the fading west, the first brighter points begin to appear. At first they are difficult to see because the horizon still holds color. Then another appears, and another. No electric glow rises from a town beyond the hills. No distant highway washes the sky in orange. Darkness here will become deep. When the final sunlight is gone, the stars will have no human competition beyond the fires themselves. The prairie expands upward. During daylight, the horizon gave the land its scale. At night, the sky will do it. The horses become harder to see first. Their dark coats blend into the outer grass. Someone moves to check them while enough light remains. The animals are valuable, and night does not erase the need to know where they are. A horse snorts as a person approaches. Another steps sideways. The sound of hooves is suddenly more distinct because the visual detail around it has faded. The bison herd is no longer visible. Yet one distant bellow reaches camp. The animals continue existing beyond sight. This may be one of the gentlest lessons darkness offers. The world does not stop where our vision ends. Something moves in grass we cannot see. Animals feed. Clouds continue beyond the horizon. Water follows its channels. People in distant camps tend their own fires. The unseen is not empty. A breeze passes through. The tipi coverings shift softly. The air is cool enough now that robes begin to return around shoulders. The same material that seemed unnecessary in the heat of midday becomes comforting again. Temperature has completed its long circle. Cold before dawn. Heat at midday. Coolness after sunset. The body has traveled through the day even when the camp itself has remained in place. Someone adds wood to a fire. Sparks rise. For an instant they resemble a small group of stars trying to join the larger ones. Then they vanish. The darkness between the lodges becomes more complete. People still move through it with familiarity. Paths known in daylight do not disappear merely because the eye sees less. Voices become guides. Firelight marks households. The smell of smoke tells direction. A dog's movement reveals where something has passed. Human senses adapt. Inside one lodge, the fire casts a low glow against hide walls. The transition from outside darkness to interior warmth is stronger now than it was during the afternoon. Robes lie ready. People settle nearer to one another. The sounds from beyond the tipi become softened by hide. A horse outside. A distant voice. The crackle of another fire. Wind brushing the covering. The interior becomes a world nested inside another world. A family within a tipi within the Tayospe. The Tayospe within the camp within the prairie. the prairie beneath the stars, each circle held inside something larger. And perhaps that is how belonging feels from here, not like possession, but like being contained within relationships that continue beyond the limits of the self. Outside again, the stars have multiplied. The last color remains only as a thin band above the western hills. Pa is now almost entirely black. The campfires shine as separate points on the ground, modest beneath the greater field of light overhead. No one needs to name every star for the sky to matter. No one needs to turn it into a chart. It is simply present above every human movement, older than the camp, older than the remembered routes, older than the herds. And yet, every person who lifts their eyes sees it from this particular moment, this particular patch of earth, among these particular relatives. Time can make the sky feel eternal. Human life makes it intimate. A voice continues quietly near one of the fires. Perhaps memory is being shared, perhaps ordinary conversation. We should not invent the words. The sound itself is enough. Another person answers. A child shifts beneath a robe. A dog lifts its head and settles again. The fires burn lower. The camp has not gone to sleep yet. There are still embers to tend, animals to hear, relatives still awake, and a sky that has only just entered its deepest darkness. The deepest part of the night does not arrive all at once. It settles by degrees. A conversation near one fire grows quieter. Another fire is reduced to embers. A horse shifts somewhere beyond the lodges and then becomes still. The dogs move less often now. What remains is not complete silence, but a thinner world of sound in which every small movement seems farther apart. The prairie is darker than anything the day suggested. Without moonlight strong enough to erase the stars, the open country becomes almost impossible to measure. The horizon disappears first. Then the distinction between distant grass and distant sky becomes uncertain. Only the black shape of the hills remains, not because it can be seen clearly, but because the stars seem to stop where the land rises. Pa holds its place in darkness. The campfires are smaller now. Some still burn with visible flame, but others have collapsed into red centers beneath ash. These low fires give little light beyond the nearest hands and faces. The farther edges of the camp dissolve into night. Inside the lodges, people begin to settle fully beneath robes. The hide walls move slightly whenever the wind passes. From outside comes the sound of grass brushing grass. Occasionally a horse exhales, then nothing again. The body notices the coolness more strongly now. The heat stored in the earth during afternoon has faded. The air entering through the lodge opening and smoke hole is colder. A robe that felt unnecessary hours earlier becomes heavy comfort around shoulders and legs. The same bison that fed the camp now protects sleeping bodies from the night. Again the animal appears without appearing. In food, in hide, in warmth, in the walls themselves. The relationship continues even while everyone rests. No one needs to think about this consciously. Much of human dependence is lived without being named. A person can sleep beneath a material without reviewing how it came to be there. That is what knowledge makes possible. Work completed earlier becomes comfort later. The scraped hide becomes a robe. The hunt becomes a meal. The preserved meat becomes provision for another day. The gathered wood becomes a fire. The teepee raised by practiced hands becomes shelter from the cold. The visible labor disappears into ordinary life. Perhaps one of the greatest achievements of any community is precisely this: to make survival feel, for a while, uneventful. A child can sleep without considering the many skills surrounding that sleep. Someone else knew how to prepare the hide. Someone knew how to keep the fire. Someone knew how to find water. Someone knew how to train a horse. Someone knew how to preserve food. Someone remembered where the camp could stand safely. Someone remembered who belonged to whom. The sleeping child inherits all of that without needing to hold it yet. One day, some of it will pass into those younger hands. For now, the robe is enough. Outside, the wind changes direction. A faint smell of smoke enters the night air and crosses between the lodges. The smoke is cooler now than it seemed during the day. It no longer rises through bright sunlight. Instead, it disappears almost immediately after leaving the glow of the fires. The stars above remain sharp. There is no city anywhere nearby to dim them. No window burns brighter than the sky. No road carries a moving line of light across the horizon. The human lights here are modest. That changes the scale of everything. A campfire is important because darkness is real. The stars are overwhelming because nothing competes with them. A person looking upward does not see decorative points added to a night sky. The sky itself becomes the largest thing in existence. It begins directly above the tippy poles and goes on without any visible boundary. The old traveler has spent enough years beneath different skies to know that human beings often become quieter when the world above them grows larger. There is less need to fill the dark with explanation. The stars do not ask to be understood before they can be felt. A person can look upward and recognize distance without calculating it, time without measuring it, continuity without naming it. The camp is temporary. The stars seem permanent, yet both are moving. The people may break camp in days or weeks. The herds will shift. Weather will change. Grass will cure and fade. Cold will strengthen as seasons turn. The stars, too, change slowly across the year, though no single night reveals how much. Nothing is truly still. Stillness is only movement too slow to trouble the senses. Near one lodge, a final conversation ends. No farewell is needed between relatives who will wake near one another. Someone pulls a robe more closely around themselves. A dog turns twice on the earth and lies down. The fire makes a small sound as one piece of wood collapses inward. Beyond the camp, the unseen horses remain close enough that their movements can occasionally be heard. They are valuable even while sleeping humans cannot see them. A horse represents food indirectly because it changes the hunt. It represents travel because it expands the camp's reach. It represents carrying power because it can draw a travois. It represents stored effort because training takes time. And it represents uncertainty because an animal always remains an animal with its own reactions, fear, fatigue, and will. Living with horses requires observation, not simply ownership. The night hides the details of the animal, but not the relationship. Someone will check them again when light returns. Someone will notice if one is missing. Someone will know which horse is trusted near bison and which is better suited to another task. Knowledge is often specific, not horses, but this horse, not children, but this child, not family, but this network of relatives, not the prairie, but this creek, this rise, this route, this place where camp has stood before. The world becomes meaningful through particular things. From a distance, outsiders see categories. The people living here know names, histories, temperaments, obligations, memories. The night makes categories disappear first. A horse becomes a sound. A lodge becomes a silhouette. A person becomes a breathing presence beside a fire. The differences remain, but darkness removes their surfaces. Perhaps that is why nighttime can make a camp feel more unified. The circle is no longer defined by visible typists. It is defined by where the fires are, by where voices come from, by where people know relatives are sleeping. Belonging persists after vision fades. Another bison call reaches the camp. It is quieter than before, or farther away. There is no way to know from sound alone. The herd continues beyond the darkness. Bison are not standing still simply because humans have stopped watching them. Some animals feed, some lie down, some shift within the group. Bulls remain among cows and calves during this season. The social world of the herd continues beneath the same stars. So does the world of prairie dogs in their towns. So do deer near darker ground. So do coyotes moving through open country. Night belongs to many lives at once. The camp is only one of them. Humans have a habit of treating darkness as empty because so much becomes invisible. But the unseen landscape is still crowded with movement. Paws, hooves, wings, insects, wind, water moving through channels too dark to see, roots holding soil, grass bending and rising. The prairie does not sleep in a human way. It changes activity. Inside the lodge, however, human sleep grows deeper. Breathing becomes slower. The fire is barely bright enough to color the nearest surfaces. The smell of hide and smoke is stronger here than outside. The air is warmer near the center and cooler toward the edges. The ground feels firm beneath robes. Every small sound from outside reaches the interior, softened by the hide covering. A horse's movement becomes a dull rhythm. Wind becomes a low brushing sound. A voice from another lodge becomes only tone, then disappears. The tipi is not sealed from the world. It filters it. That may be one reason its interior feels so connected to the prairie. The person inside does not forget that wind exists, does not forget that horses are near, does not forget that cold surrounds the shelter. The outside world remains present, only gentler. The lodge does not defeat nature. It negotiates with it. Enough warmth, enough protection, enough airflow for smoke, enough portability for movement. An architecture shaped not by permanence, but by adaptation. The old traveler has seen stone cities that seem determined to resist time, walls thick enough to survive rulers, monuments made for centuries, towers built to outlast the hands that raised them. There is another kind of wisdom here. A shelter does not need to defeat time if it can move with it. The teepee survives not because one structure remains standing forever, but because the knowledge of how to make, raise, use, lower, and carry it survives. The object is temporary. The form endures. That distinction belongs to much of human culture. A song ends. The knowledge of the song remains. A fire goes out. Someone knows how to make another. A camp moves. The circle can be made again. A person dies. Relatives remember. Continuity is not the refusal to lose things. It is the ability to carry forward what can still live. The night deepens. Cold gathers more strongly in low places. The black hills disappear almost completely now, leaving only the faintest difference between earth and sky. A few stars seem to hover directly above where the hills must be. One fire outside is stirred. A hand reaches into darkness with a piece of wood and pushes embers together. For a moment the glow expands. Orange light touches the edge of a robe. Then the fire settles. No one speaks. The act is enough. Fire requires attention even when everyone is tired. Warmth is not self-sustaining. Neither is community. Neither is memory. Perhaps the connection is too easy to make, but some thoughts arise naturally when a person has watched enough fires. What survives usually survives because someone tends it. Not dramatically, repeatedly. A little wood, a remembered story, a repaired strap. A child shown how to hold a tool. A place revisited, a relative cared for. Civilizations are often described through wars and migrations, but continuity is usually quieter. It happens when someone decides that something worth keeping will not be allowed to disappear today. The embers remain, far away. The bison are silent again. The sky turns slowly. No one notices the motion from moment to moment. Hours pass without the camp needing to count them. There are no mechanical clocks here. Night is measured through changes in temperature, the position of stars, the exhaustion of fires, the depth of sleep, the instinctive sense that darkness has been long. The body becomes part of the timekeeping. Someone wakes briefly, listens. Nothing seems wrong. The person adjusts a robe and returns to sleep. A dog hears something farther away and raises its head. For several seconds it remains alert. Then the head lowers. The camp returns to quiet. The darkness now feels complete enough that the first hint of dawn seems impossible. But dawn is already approaching. Not visibly, Not yet. Still, the night is finite. Every night is, even when it feels endless from within. The eastern horizon will eventually lose its blackness. Stars there will fade first. The coldest air may arrive before the sun. Fires will need tending again. Horses will emerge from darkness. Smoke will rise. Children will wake. And the same world we entered before dawn will begin again without repeating itself. That is perhaps the most peaceful thing about an ordinary day. Nothing extraordinary is required for it to matter. A community wakes, works, eats, repairs, teaches, watches weather, cares for animals, remembers, rests, then begins again. History can be built from nothing more spectacular than that. The idea would be easy to romanticize, so it is worth resisting the temptation. Life here is not effortless. Cold can be dangerous. Storms can be violent. Hunts can fail. Bison are powerful animals. Travel demands labor. Hides require long processing. Food must be preserved correctly. Relationships with neighboring peoples can involve diplomacy, exchange, competition, and conflict. Illness, injury, age, and loss exist here as everywhere. Peace is not the absence of difficulty. It is simply the atmosphere of this particular night, a night in which the camp is fed. The horses are near. The storm passed elsewhere. The fires still hold warmth. Relatives sleep within calling distance. That is enough. A small sound comes from outside. Perhaps a hoof. Perhaps the dry movement of grass. The distinction does not matter. The listener who has spent the day here no longer needs every sound identified. The world has become familiar enough to remain partly unknown. There is comfort in that. Not everything needs explanation. Not every sound needs a source. Not every darkness needs a light. Beyond the lodge, wind moves across the prairie from one horizon toward another. It passes through grass that no one owns in the modern sense. Crosses animal tracks, touches drying racks now still in darkness, moves over cold ash, presses gently against the lodge covering, continues toward the hills. The same wind may move through ponderosa pine later. It may cross a creek. It may reach another camp. There is no boundary in the air telling it where one world ends. Human boundaries are often much more visible to humans than to weather. Wind passes. Bison pass. Clouds pass. People pass too. Movement is not always departure. Sometimes movement is simply the form life takes. The Lakota camp may stand here for a while longer. Then one day the typus will come down. The poles will be gathered, hides folded, meat packed, belongings secured, travois arranged, children prepared, horses loaded. The fires will be left behind or carried forward in whatever ways the community knows. The circle that looked permanent beneath yesterday's stars will loosen. Families will move across the grass. The place will become quieter. Paths will fade. Pressed grass will rise. Ash will scatter. Wind will enter spaces where people once sat, and somewhere farther away, the circle will be made again. That future movement does not diminish the reality of the home that exists tonight. A place does not become meaningless because one eventually leaves it. Sometimes the ability to leave is part of what makes the place possible. The camp is both here and capable of elsewhere. A paradox only if home is imagined as something nailed to the earth. Here, home is partly carried in relationship. The same relatives can surround one another in another place. The same skills can raise another lodge. The same stories can be told beneath another sky. The same food can travel. The same child can wake somewhere new and still know where they belong. The night begins to thin at last, not with brightness, with a very slight change in the east. Black becomes charcoal. One star close to the horizon weakens, then another. The transition is so slow that the eye questions whether it is happening. Cold remains. The fires are still low. Most of the camp still sleeps. This is the hour when the world seems held between two states. Night has not left. Morning has not arrived. The prairie waits inside a grayness that reveals shape before color. Tippy poles return first. They emerge against the eastern sky exactly as they did before. Then the tops of lodges. Then the nearest horses, appearing again as dark forms. A dog stands, stretches, and shakes itself. No one has announced a new day. The world simply makes one. A person near the fire wakes enough to reach toward the embers. The motion is familiar. Ash is moved. A hidden red center appears. Dry fuel is brought close. For a few seconds nothing happens. Then a small flame catches. It is the same gesture we saw at the beginning, but it is not repetition. The hands may be different. The air feels different. Yesterday's meat is drier. Yesterday's hide has changed beneath hours of work. Children who watched yesterday have one more day of memory. The horses have grazed through another night. The herd has shifted somewhere beyond sight. Time has passed. That is what repetition often hides. Human beings repeat actions because the world is never exactly the same when they perform them again. Fire is lit again. Food is prepared again. A lodge is entered again. A horse is checked again. But each act occurs inside a changing life. The flame strengthens. Smoke rises into the pale air. Another lodge begins to stir. Then another. The camp becomes visible in layers. The drying racks stand where they were left. The grass around them is damp only with the cold of night, not rain. The distant storm never crossed the camp. The western hills remain dark, though their edges are returning. Pasa awaits beneath the first light. Somewhere farther out, a horse gives a low call. Another answers. The prairie dogs will soon become active. Birds will begin to claim the open air with sound. Insects will return as warmth increases. And beyond the rolling ground, bison continue the movements that have shaped so much of the day we have just lived. No one here knows that centuries later, the world around them will be transformed almost beyond recognition. They do not know which names future maps will use. They do not know what roads will cross this country. They do not know which objects from their lives may one day rest behind museum glass. and they do not need to. Their lives are not waiting for the future to give them meaning. This morning already has meaning. The child warming near the fire. The woman returning to unfinished work. The man looking toward the horses. The elder carrying memory. The dog walking between lodges. The smell of smoke. The cold air. The dark hills. The bison somewhere beyond sight. That is enough of a world. The old traveler stands quietly at its edge. There is nothing left to explain. The camp is waking, and explanations would only make it smaller. Better to let the sounds return on their own. The first voices, the shifting hides, the horses, the fire, the grass, a bird calling from somewhere in the widening light, the sky slowly becoming blue, a child stepping outside, smoke bending once in the morning wind, another day beginning, and the people moving into it, carrying yesterday with them without needing to look back.